Welcome to Growth Uncut, everyone, and it is such a pleasure to be here with Edith today. I met this lovely human being in the summer during the Barcelona Summer School and just thought she would be just such a brilliant person to get onto the podcast to talk a little bit about her work and talk a little bit about what Justice 2.0 looks like from her. So can I ask you to introduce yourself and introduce your organization?
I am the executive director of the European Forum for Restorative Justice. And this is a network organization on developing restorative justice. We have more than 400 members from all over Europe and beyond, organizations, also individuals coming from different type of work and professional experience. So we have practitioners, obviously, but also policymakers, trainers, a lot of academics, researchers, educators, but also some students, some artists, activists. So it's a very, very nice, diverse group of people who are passionate about restorative justice.
Wonderful. And tell me a little bit about, I guess, your values within the organization. What are the things that really are the heart of the forum?
Well, I think dialogue and connection, as well as in restorative justice. So I think our main goal is to support the field, to develop, to bring people together, to create spaces where genuine conversations can happen, where ideas are welcome, where also differences are welcome, and that we really feel this community to develop something new. Because I think a lot of people working in restorative justice are still working alone, or not in big organizations, or a little bit outside of the mainstream. So I think our network really creates a space where more in-depth conversations can happen, and there is a sense of support from everybody.
I love that. I love that. And it really reminds me of the stuff that we do as well, but that real belonging, isn't it? There's something about, I think, when we are in practice, whether we're in prisons or probation or anywhere within that justice system working, we have maybe historically and traditionally found our belonging maybe within that institution. And for me, there's something about let's think about where our values are and where our ideologies are around the way in which we approach work. And that diversity is so important, isn't it? It's such an important way in which you can really come up with sustainable solutions, connect on in different ways, learn from each other. It's just something that when you're talking, I think it's just there's so much value in that. And what I see sometimes, maybe within prisons and within the probation kind of landscape, that those connections aren't necessarily there. And so people are really wanting that and really hoping for that. And I guess for me, this podcast, I hope communicates this idea that you don't necessarily need to find that belonging only in your work. You can find it elsewhere. You can find it with like-minded people. You can find it where people value the things that you also value. So it's lovely to hear you talk about the work that you do. What about the challenges and I guess the reality of it sometimes? It sounds wonderful, but I guess I imagine you must come up with a lot of challenges, not only within this kind of space and within restorative justice, but also as an organization. So what challenges do you face?
How much time we have? um, well, I think there is a general challenge that the concept of restorative justice is still not really well known or misunderstood often. Even in the professional environment, sometimes we really have to start from scratch and explain what we mean on restorative justice. So that's one of the challenges, that it's not really an idea or a concept that is well known and accepted. And sometimes it is seen too soft or something nice to add, but not really something that could be the core idea and way of working in the criminal justice. Of course, the current societal circumstances are also not really helpful. We see a lot of polarization, obviously wars, armed conflict, and a lot of political discourse that alienates people from each other, a lot of othering, a lot of scapegoating, and all of that is really against the idea that we really believe that people can talk about their experiences and can really be responsible for their issues, conflicts, harms, and have the capacity to solve it themselves. So I think we also tend to give politicians all the power to solve issues for us. But I think we should empower the people to step up for themselves and give them the space and the help to do it in a non-violent way. And I think restorative justice can contribute to that for sure, also on the societal level.
Yeah. And I think, it's really interesting, isn't it, this myth? And it gets me as well when we think about, I guess, rehabilitation or growth more broadly, this real assumption that it's pink and it's fluffy and it's easy. Essentially, it's an easy option, unlike punishment, which is hard and retributive, and that's the stuff that we want people to really hurt. But I would say, in terms of the little I know around restorative justice, but certainly with stuff around repairing relationships and that kind of restorative process of repairing ruptures, it is so difficult. People have to be really vulnerable and really take responsibility and listen to the impact that they've maybe had on someone, listen to someone's heart, which is really emotive. And I think there is just something about that isn't pink or fluffy. It's actually really brave to do that, I think, because, hurt people can hurt people, but if you heal them, then we can create a society that is a lot more focused on those kind of relational connections. So absolutely, absolutely get you. And that point around the minor crimes, that ultimately, from what we've talked about previously, that it's almost been pigeonholed. Oh, it's okay for the small offences, restorative justice can be done. But from your experience, you've seen it across the board in terms of different crime types and different severities of crime, right?
Exactly. And we also see that the impact it has on the people's lives is even greater if it happens in cases when the harm was very big or important. And we see practices from sexual violence, murder cases, different armed conflicts, through also political violence and terrorism. So I think there is a big sphere of conflicts where the possibility for people to just sit together or even being in contact with each other through a facilitator without seeing each other, but being able to really tell what happened to them and what were the consequences. And it's as important for the people who caused the harm as for the people who suffered from the harm. And I go even beyond that, because if something serious happens, it has so much implications for so many people who are not even part of the criminal justice process or not considered at all, but they witnessed it. They are friends, family members of anybody involved in what happened. The circles are much bigger who are affected, and they don't get the chance really to face each other, to express how they feel, and also bring in their resources, how to answer or how to make things better. So there is also a lot of resource in people, also in supporting the healing process of the survivor, and also helping the person who caused the harm to change their life, to change their behavior. So I think we also don't use this potential support out there in the criminal justice system. We reduce the whole issue to facts, not the story of the people, not the lived experience of the people, but facts that can be proved, and then guilt or not guilt, and then punishment. And the victim is very often just a source of information and facts, even questioned in the process. It might be, and often it is the case, re-victimizing. The accused persons are advised to keep silent. You don't say anything, you don't take responsibility, and maybe then we can sneak out, or there won't be enough proof for your guilt. And the whole process polarizes the people. And then at the end, there might be punishment that doesn't feel just always. It doesn't help the victim to have a lot of questions answered. It doesn't always help to give them back a sense of safety, and so on. So As Niels Christie said, if something caused pain, that what the system does answers this with inflicting even more pain. And we want to challenge that. We think that a system answering those harms should bring a sort of healing or an opportunity to eradicate the pain and not to inflict more pain. So we really see it's possible, and we really see many, many, many cases, even in the most horrendous, serious cases, where this dialogue process could really bring a change in the life path of anybody involved.
And just listening to you there, I think it goes down to something that I learned a lot within the kind of Norwegian work, which is this real focus to just be seen and be heard. And whether that is the victim, whether that is the person who's inflicted the harm, whether that's that circle that are invariably really invisible and not part of that kind of healing process, to be visible and be seen and to be heard seems to be the thing that we all focus on, whether we're a leader within a prison, whether we're a practitioner on the ground. Feeling heard and seen is essential to our human soul. And I think, just listening to you there, I think it's just something restorative justice does that throughout all of its process. And I think that is why I'm just so supportive of it. So I guess moving on to Justice 2.0, how do the two connect? How does restorative justice connect with Justice 2.0?
Just to go back to your remark on being seen, I really resonate with that. And I think what is also super important is being seen not only with the worst thing that we have done. And I talk about the offender experience. For how long do you remain the offender of that crime? And for how long nothing else of your personality or other personal traits can be really seen? So I think it's also important not to reduce people to their experience as offender or as victim, but really giving them, the possibility to bring in a much wider array of their self, that can also give empowerment, and also being seen as a complex human being, also with our past, for example, that very often the criminal justice doesn't really take into account how people ended up in that situation. And I don't think that restorative justice itself can bring all the solutions, but I think it can be a starting point then to look for the support out there that is the most beneficial for the person in their situation, for example. And I see a lot of connections with Justice 2.0. First of all, a very critical approach to the current criminal justice system and how does that work at the moment. I think this relational aspect, that we should also create a system where people are not polarized and alienated from each other, but where they can respectfully communicate to each other and they can be their true selves. They don't have to act as the system expects them to act, but really be their true self. I see a lot of connection on centering the human being in whatever we do, to focus on needs, to focus on resolving the harm or restoring the harm somehow, to look at the kind of collective responsibility for each professional, also bringing in what they can provide for the situation to be better. And I also see this connection with the idea of a long-term transformation of the system and creating basically not only more efficient, but also more humane ways of dealing with criminality and the harm that it caused.
And what about letting go? What about Justice 1.0 is almost, we still retain some of the wonderful stuff that has happened along the way. So we don't take away the historical achievements, but there's things around Justice 1.0, which are the things that we would maybe seem as harmful or disruptive or problematic, I guess, that we would want to say, do you know what, as we upgrade to justice, these are the things we want to leave behind. What might those things be for you?
I think first of all, and it's not the system itself and how it operates, but one step back, I think the idea that if a norm was broken, then the only consequence we can think of is punishment. So I would really challenge that idea, because I think we need norms in society, that's clear. And we also need something to happen if those norms are broken. But what needs to be happened? I think there we have a lot of other options, and we just really stuck in this idea that we need punishment, and more the harm, the more punishment. And if we see criminality growing, we need even more harsh punishment. And it's a vicious circle, and it's proven it doesn't really help. It doesn't solve the problem. And I don't say that we should abolish punishment at all, but I just want to say that we have to bring in new ways of reacting to crime. And I think, as you said in the beginning, for two people to really sit together and listen to each other, and how something have affected them, is sometimes much more difficult and asks much more than having a suspended sentence, for example. So I think that's a consequence. That's a very hard consequence from which people can learn, understand, find ideas how to move forward. And I think that achieves much more of the goals of the criminal justice system than simply punishment. So that's one idea I really would like to challenge, that we need to be more punitive to create safer societies. I don't want to feel safe somewhere because basically there are fences and I cannot meet people. I want to feel safe with the people at any moment where we meet, because I know that I can trust them. And that's what restorative justice tries to build: trust between people, even between people who experienced maybe the most harmful connection in their life. And it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And, going back to Niels Christie, I think we are fellow fans of Niels Christie's work, but he talks about when harm takes place, the first thing we should do from his perspective is dialogue. And I guess that is restorative justice, isn't it? There's something about talking prior to that real kind of reactive, punitive, harsh, almost emotional response that we get quite naturally, because obviously people have been hurt, isn't it? But I think there's just something about sitting and having that space, and having that space for dialogue, and yeah, with the power of that. I guess my next question is more around, and something that maybe I also struggle with from a culture point of view, is that we go into a lot of places and do a kind of bolt-on project and say, right, we're going to do some work within culture work, and it doesn't necessarily, that sustainability piece, I guess, in terms of how we can make things a lot more integrated, how we can make things a lot more kind of central. And I see that restorative justice could certainly be that. That if you look through the lens of restorative justice, let's say within a prison environment, it would fundamentally change a lot of the ways in which we respond to harm. But why do you feel we need to do that? What is it about restorative justice that kind of thinks it needs to be central, it needs to be integrated into the system, rather than being a kind of just a bolt-on that sits on the outskirts? What's your thoughts?
But I think because it humanizes the system, not only the protagonists of the case, but I think also the professionals. And also, as professionals, we become much more open to different realities, and probably our tools or ideas about solutions can also widen just listening to the people who are involved. So I think the whole system needs to be more human, and also for those who work in the system, that we, as you said, we find our connections in the small institution where we work. But I also experience often that these silos are really closed. A lot of people don't even know what happens at the other stage of the case. So I think we need more connection, we need more understanding, and a more holistic way of looking at the issue. And everybody brings their own professional experience and qualities. So I think also the system shouldn't be about who is better, but really how we make the best out of what we can offer in the circumstances that we have. Just as you mentioned prisons or probation, another challenge I think in the perception of restorative justice is that it's a tool for diversion for minor crimes. And then you go to victim offender mediation or a conferencing, and then the case is solved. But restorative approaches can be applied in many, many, many other ways, especially in a prison setting, which is a harsh setting, which doesn't really help people to be themselves. People are in certain roles and act in a certain way. People are alienated from a normalized way of living. People are angry, polarized, fight the system. And it doesn't really help, I think, reintegration. And also, when somebody faces the time they might leave prison, they have a lot of anxiety, or they might have a lot of anxiety. Also, their surrounding, their family or friends, social connections might have questions, might have fears, for example. So why we don't use a restorative approach to prepare um, um, release from prison, to have a conference on, okay, what needs to happen, or what are expectations, who can offer what, and move forward that way. Also, in conflicts within prison, there are many between staff and inmates. Again, there is a punitive system to react to that, but why don't we try to bring in dialogue? Many, many ways, I think, where we can think of a restorative solution.
Just in terms of what you're saying, it also makes me think about how we can apply and have applied, in light of what we learned at the summer school, restorative justice to state crime, right? Or bigger institutional crime or injustice, in that way. I think there's something about this assumption that we've got an individual that goes through restorative justice with victims and those that are impacted by that crime. But there's also something for me about that responsibility that maybe systems and criminal justice systems and large institutions, education, hospitals, the church, whatever it may be, those larger institutions that can sometimes almost feel immune to some of the behaviour that they kind of deliver. How restorative justice can be used as a way in which we can restore some of that faith and trust and legitimacy in institutions that let us down, because I see a lot of moral injury where staff have to make decisions that they know are fundamentally wrong, but they have to make it as part of their commitment to the state. And for me, there's something there that restorative justice could be the answer for that, where people do feel that they have a voice, where people do feel that they can be part of the solution. But that healing process, so we can start having greater faith in our systems, I think is something that needs to happen at this stage, in light of, we've got some really tough stuff going on over here around IPPs, which are people that are imprisoned for public protection, but they get given, a year sentence and they're still there 19 years later and don't have an end date. That has been seen and is acknowledged by the UN as psychological torture. That's the kind of stuff that we have an opportunity where we can heal and work through this stuff so that people can be seen and heard quite rightly. For me, restorative justice could be really ambitious, right? It could be the answer or the approach that could really heal our relationship with institutions that have maybe let us down.
I think there is a lot of potential there, and already there are examples to address these larger scale issues through restorative justice. Think about, in Canada, the Indigenous residential schools that were places that committed a lot of harm towards the children. The idea itself, but also the different institutions, sexual violence, a lot of unreported death of students and so on. And it took a generation at least to face that. And in that time span, often the criminal justice system doesn't have even the possibility to react, or the people who were in charge and responsible don't live anymore. But it doesn't mean that as a society we don't have to address these issues, that we don't have to give the recognition to the victims, to seek for their stories to be told, and also looking at the institution as such as taking responsibility. But also in Europe, in many countries, there are a lot of cases popping up of sexual abuse in different institutional settings, and there are restorative processes to deal with them. We have a working group at the European Forum on Institutional Abuse and Restorative Justice. There will be a publication coming up very soon, I think, on this issue, but it's really an evolving field and topic in restorative justice. But again, I think the fact that victims are acknowledged, that their lived experience can be shared, and there is a recognition of their harms and what happened, it's already a step forward. I think it cannot often offer more. Even that, I think, needs a safe space and facilitation that restorative justice professionals can bring.
I wonder whether, and I guess this is the essence of the network, isn't it? There's something for me about so much is happening, and even just brightening that up and getting that out into different pockets that maybe don't realize how much restorative justice is happening. It's that exposure and that awareness piece that you talked about, at the very beginning of our discussion, that I think is just really essential, because things are happening and they are effective, and they bring healing, and there's things that are very well established and evidenced and seen as effective. I guess one of the reasons why we're together is about how do we get that out, and how do we share that with people that are practitioners or members of the public, to really highlight that kind of benefit. And I guess that leads on beautifully to the last question, which is, our miracle of Justice 2.0 has taken place. The upgrade has been successful. We have seen it advertised on the TV. What would it look like? Like, we wake up, and what would it look like for you in terms of what would Justice 2.0 look like in very real terms, I guess?
Well, I think from a restorative justice point of view, I think that the system and people who work there are trauma informed, that they ask the question, what do you need now, whenever they have an interaction with the people involved. And genuinely, everybody who is involved or had an effect of what happened has the possibility to ask for restorative justice. So they have access to restorative justice practitioners at any moment, in any case, 20 years after what happened. These dialogues can happen. And hopefully they also have an effect on what happens in the process, but that's not the most essential. I think for us, the most essential is that people who really wish to engage in these conversations, in these dialogues, are getting the possibility and getting the support from practitioners who can safely conduct the process. It has to remain voluntary. It's not something that can be imposed on people. And people need their time, and they need to feel if they are ready for that. So I think if we get rid of the limitations that the system now puts on the access on restorative justice, in which type of cases, in which moment of the procedure, it has to take place in such a time, and then the outcome should be this or that or that. So that's not restorative yet. It's not fully restorative, but our vision is that this option is there for everybody when they want to choose this path for themselves.
I love that. And I guess the last piece of the puzzle is, I guess, some practical advice. What would be the first step? That's your vision for Justice 2.0, which sounds brilliant and relational and everything we would love it to be. What do you think might be a first step for people that are watching, for journalists, for politicians, for colleagues, for anyone? What would you say might be a first step for them to?
Well, first, thanks for taking the time to watch this. And I think to look for practitioners in your area, or look for more information, what is already out there, seek the connection with the people, go for a training or some kind of event that can enlarge your knowledge. If you are teaching wherever, university level, please bring restorative justice as a topic in your course. Let students hear about this idea. Visit our website, for example. There is a lot of information also. there. So the European Forum for Restorative Justice website has also films, videos, written materials on different fields of application of restorative justice. You can reach out to us also if you need more information. We have also a list of members in different countries in the world, so you can also look at who are member of our network and reach out to them. Come to our beautiful festival in Leuven, beginning of December this year, where we celebrate our 25th anniversary and bring together a lot of artists who were already inspired by restorative justice. But also you can sign up to our trainings. We have every 2 years big international conference that will take place next June in Poznan in Poland. But I think we are not the only source of information. I think the most important is that wherever you are in the world, that you find your local connections and try to think together what is a possible next step in your context and where you work. And I think once you have the allies and people with similar mindsets, then miracles can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hope, it brings me hope. You just talking about that, I think there's just something about finding a tribe, finding the people around you that share that passion and, extending that out, I guess, past restorative justice and more broadly with Justice 2.0, whatever it is that you are passionate about, if it involves compassion or building trust or being courageous, whatever principle resonates with you, then it's just finding those people that are like-minded because when we feel disconnected, when we feel isolated or lonely, that's generally when we tap out and we leave our work. And that's the sad bit about it, is that sometimes we burn out because we don't find those people that can refuel us and give us hope and all of that. And you give me hope. So it's been lovely talking with you and sharing your visions and your thoughts around restorative justice. And I will put in all of the links that we've talked about in the session today. So if you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching this through Growth Uncut or listening through the Growth Uncut, then just have a look at the blurb and we'll have all the signposting for that. But thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. But I'm so grateful for your time and really appreciate you and appreciate our relationship. And having met you this year has been a dream. So thank you so much.
Well, same for me, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we have a lot of reciprocal inspiration from each other. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more about Justice 2.0, have a look on our website, www.growtransformbelong.com. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, the full lot. And thanks so much. And we'll catch you next time. All the best. Bye.